I still remember the message that broke my world. We love your brother's children more. My kids weren't welcome at Thanksgiving, and my parents didn't even try to hide it. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling, wondering if I had done something wrong. All those years of sacrifices, late-night calls, support, and care, gone unrecognized. And the worst part? They expected me to smile, to pretend everything was fine. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? That crushing mix of betrayal and disbelief hit me like a storm, but I refused to let it define me. The message from my parents blinked on my phone screen, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. We love your brother's children more. There's no space for your kids at Thanksgiving. My stomach sank as if gravity had doubled. I stared at the screen, trying to convince myself it was some cruel mistake, but the words repeated in my mind like a mocking echo. I had always believed that family meant unconditional love, that trust was sacred, that loyalty would never be questioned. And yet, here it was, shattered in a single sentence. I scrolled through our family Instagram page, hoping to find some error. Maybe the pictures had been mistagged, but every post I saw featured my brother's children, smiling, celebrated, adored. Not a single picture of my own. It felt like walking into a room and discovering I had never belonged. Have you ever felt that? To be present and yet invisible? To pour your heart into people who treat it as worthless? That confusion and self-doubt gnawed at me, unrelenting. I asked myself again and again, was this my fault? Did I fail as a daughter, as a mother, as a person who gave everything? The more I tried to rationalize, the deeper the shame sank in. Memories began to surface, like photographs torn from an old album. Past Thanksgivings, birthdays, holidays when I had been subtly excluded, when invitations arrived late or with excuses, when gifts meant for my children were quietly diverted to my brother's kids. At the time, I had dismissed it as oversensitivity or imagined slights. I told myself, I'm reading too much into it. I should be grateful for what we do have. But now, looking back with clear eyes, I could see a pattern, deliberate and consistent. The feeling of invisibility wasn't a mistake, it was orchestrated, and I was the last to know, or perhaps deliberately kept from knowing. As I sat there scrolling, a pause settled in my chest. I looked at the phone in my hands and spoke aloud, more to the room than anyone else. Have you ever felt like you didn't matter to the people who should have loved you the most? My voice trembled. It was the first time I allowed myself to admit the pain to anyone, even if that someone was invisible. I wanted someone to hear, to confirm that I wasn't imagining it, that this betrayal was real. For a fleeting moment, empathy broke through my numbness. The hurt softened into a quiet ache. That pause, the space where I let myself feel, was essential. It allowed me to breathe, to remember that I was more than my parents' perception of me, that I had children who loved me, who saw me. That small, fragile reassurance was a seed I clung to. But the emotional calm was fleeting. A notification pinged. A new post from my brother, sharing photos from a family dinner the night before. His kids were laughing, holding pumpkin pies, the captions oozing love and pride. My own children weren't there. My mother had commented, praising their manners, their smiles. I felt a surge of anger so sudden, I almost dropped my phone. How could they post this publicly, flaunting their favoritism while pretending nothing had happened? How could I have devoted years of my life to supporting them and still be treated as an outsider in my own family. My confusion deepened into disbelief, disbelief into hurt, and hurt into a simmering need for clarity. The gaslighting had been subtle, pervasive. Direct messages disguised as casual check-ins, comments implying I was overreacting, hints that I was too sensitive or not understanding family priorities. In the real world, my parents never directly said, "We don't love you," but their actions and words created the same effect. They had cultivated an environment where my self-doubt was normalized, where questioning their judgment seemed unreasonable. And now, with this overt message, the carefully constructed illusion crumbled. A micro cliffhanger gnawed at the edge of my mind. The worst part wasn't just the preference for my brother's children. No, it was the realization that this pattern had been ongoing for years. I remembered moments when I had offered help and support, only to have it ignored or redirected to benefit my brother. Small betrayals compounded over time, subtle manipulations that chipped away at my sense of worth. And still I had blamed myself, thinking perhaps I had done something wrong or deserved exclusion. That clarity was bitter. Scrolling further, I noticed a group chat I had been added to recently, but it wasn't for me. It was for discussions about my brother's family. My parents shared updates, jokes, and plans, excluding me entirely. The digital exclusion mirrored the emotional one I had long endured. They celebrated and strategized without me, assuming I would remain unaware, obediently on the sidelines. My heart ached with recognition of the toxic pattern. All those years of being accommodating, forgiving, quiet in the face of small injustices, had taught them that they could manipulate and exclude without consequence. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. The confusion and self-doubt lingered, but so did a new awareness. I began to catalog the signs, the moments I had ignored, the subtle manipulations I had rationalized. Each memory reinforced a growing understanding. This was not my fault. This was deliberate, and it was time to pay attention. For the first time, I felt the stirrings of strategic thought. Not vengeance, but clarity. I realized that recognizing the pattern was the first step in reclaiming my agency. Yet even as I processed this, I allowed myself a quiet moment of empathy. For myself, for my children, for the love I had given freely and without expectation. That pause, that soft moment of reflection was critical. It reminded me that I was not defined by their favoritism, by their neglect, by the years of subtle manipulation. I was defined by the love I could give and the life I could create beyond their influence. And in that space, the seed of empowerment quietly took root. But the thought lingered, whispering a chilling question. What else had I missed? What other subtle exclusions, manipulations, or betrayals had I ignored because I wanted to believe in family? That question haunted me, a silent micro cliffhanger, compelling me to dig deeper, to pay attention, to prepare for what was coming next. And I knew even then that the journey had only just begun. Thanksgiving arrived with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. My phone buzzed incessantly as I watched my parents live stream the gathering. The camera panned across the room, capturing my brother's children laughing, playing, basking in the attention that should have been mine. I scrolled through comments filled with adoration for their smiles, their manners, their perfect presence. My own children were absent, invisible, excluded as if they didn't exist. I gritted my teeth and clenched my fists, the disbelief pressing on my chest like a weight I could not lift. Then a message appeared, unexpected, from a distant cousin I rarely spoke to. "Emma, you should know. Your brother lied about that bonus from Mom and Dad. He pocketed money meant for gifts for your kids." My heart skipped, then stopped. The betrayal was no longer abstract. It had layers I had never imagined. My brother had not just benefited from favoritism. He had manipulated it, lied to ensure it. I could feel my stomach twist, a mix of shock and rage that blurred my vision. Tears threatened to spill, but I swallowed them, the anger heating my veins. Scrolling through old messages, I noticed something odd. A missing email thread, one that I was certain had been sent by my mother months ago. My pulse quickened. Had she deleted it? What secrets were buried there? The micro cliffhanger of what might be hidden gnawed at my mind. The sense of calculated exclusion settled over me like a cold, unyielding fog. Every memory, every slight, every tiny manipulation I had dismissed suddenly formed a jagged pattern. The deliberate orchestration of my marginalization. I remembered all the Thanksgivings I had attended, silently helping, quietly serving, making sure everyone else's joy was paramount. I had taken the high road, believed in their good intentions, convinced myself that their love was unconditional. Now the veneer had cracked, revealing a truth I could no longer ignore. It wasn't that they didn't love me. It was that they never truly valued me. I felt my confidence crumble, replaced by a raw, visceral hurt I hadn't allowed myself to name until now. After hours of scrolling and rereading messages, the anger finally found its voice. I wouldn't lash out blindly. I wouldn't respond with bitter words or impulsive accusations. Instead, I needed clarity. I needed strategy. The shift from victim to planner began quietly as I set aside the phone and sat in silence. I considered the steps ahead, screenshots of posts, video captures, metadata records, financial trails. Evidence, not emotion, would guide the way. The realization that I could act intentionally, thoughtfully, and with precision gave me a flicker of control I hadn't felt in years. I left my apartment for a walk in the park, the crisp autumn air brushing against my cheeks. The leaves crunched beneath my feet, a soothing rhythm against the chaos in my mind. I let myself pause, recalling the small, luminous moments with my children. The way my youngest clutched my hand at bedtime, how my older one laughed uncontrollably at a joke only we shared, how their warmth had always reminded me of who I truly was. That quiet reflection grounded me. The emotional rest allowed empathy and resilience to rise alongside the simmering anger. For a few minutes, I wasn't a target of betrayal. I was a mother, a woman who deserved recognition and fairness. As I wandered, I imagined speaking to the camera in my mind, sharing my story with those who might relate. Have you ever been sidelined by the very people who are supposed to love you unconditionally? I wondered if the audience could feel the ache, the shock, the anger, and yet the underlying strength. It was a subtle form of interaction, a silent invitation for the viewer to place themselves in my shoes. How would they respond? What would they do? The thought lingered like a whisper, pulling them into my world. Returning home, I began organizing what I had gathered. Every screenshot, every video, every trace of manipulation became a piece of the puzzle. I was careful, deliberate, recording details while staying emotionally present with my children. I reminded myself repeatedly, the goal wasn't revenge in a blind sense. It was understanding, clarity, and justice. I couldn't allow the shock of betrayal to cloud judgment. Each piece of evidence would tell a story of pattern, favoritism, and deception. And in that story, I would find the leverage I needed to reclaim not only my voice but my life. By the end of the day, I had mapped out the events, documented discrepancies, and begun forming a timeline. Each memory of exclusion and manipulation strengthened my resolve. Yet, I allowed myself to breathe, to sit quietly with the realization that even in this storm, there were moments of tenderness, of beauty, of love. Those moments reminded me of my worth beyond the validation, or lack thereof, of my family. And still the lingering question remained, a micro cliffhanger I carried with me. What other hidden truths had they kept from me? What other deliberate slights, small and insidious, had shaped my experience without my knowledge? The realization that discovery was only beginning both frightened and invigorated me. It was clear that nothing would ever be the same again. I had stepped past disbelief, past the initial shock, and even past the tears. Now I was poised on the precipice of action, fully aware that the journey ahead would require courage, careful thought, and an unwavering focus on the truth. The first step in reclaiming control was understanding the battlefield. I sat at my desk, laptop open, tracing patterns that had gone unnoticed for years. My parents' social media posts, carefully curated, revealed more than just favoritism. They hinted at deliberate financial manipulations. Gifts, bonuses, allowances, outings, everything directed toward my brother's children. I noted timestamps, cross-referenced dates, and began to build a timeline. The pieces were scattered, yet a disturbing pattern emerged, subtle, consistent, designed to make me question my own judgment and devotion. It wasn't just exclusion, it was a narrative they controlled. Then a twist I hadn't anticipated appeared. Digging through old bank statements and email confirmations, I found records showing my parents had received gifts I had sent for my own children, but never acknowledged publicly. They had quietly kept them aside, ensuring the public-facing image of their favoritism remained intact. A jolt of disbelief ran through me. They had constructed a double reality, one private, one performative. My anger bubbled, but I forced myself to stay calm. Documenting this evidence methodically would matter far more than any outburst. As I compiled screenshots, financial records, and message logs, a micro cliffhanger formed in my mind. What if I revealed all of this publicly right now? The consequences were unpredictable. Could I dismantle their carefully maintained facade without destroying relationships I wasn't ready to sever entirely? The tension was palpable, a silent question that demanded patience, strategy, and careful consideration. Realizing the magnitude of what I had uncovered, I shifted focus to building a support network. I began reaching out to trusted allies, lawyers, therapists, and friends who had witnessed family dynamics without being caught in the manipulation themselves. I wanted people who could provide perspective, guidance, and validation. Their role wasn't to intervene immediately, but to ensure I stayed grounded, to help me avoid reactive decisions fueled purely by emotion. Even in assembling allies, unexpected twists appeared. A close friend from college, someone I had always confided in, revealed themselves as a flying monkey. Someone who had unknowingly, or perhaps knowingly, reinforced my family's manipulations. The revelation stung. Betrayal felt familiar, but this was different. It was personal and strategic. I had to navigate this carefully, maintaining composure while reassessing trust. I couldn't afford rash decisions. Instead, I observed, confirmed facts, and adjusted my plan. The lesson was clear. Alliances could be fragile, and even those closest to me could harbor loyalty to the wrong side. I also turned to online communities, forums, and support groups dedicated to family abuse. Reading stories of others who had faced similar manipulations provided a dual effect: validation of my experiences and insight into potential strategies. The shared knowledge, legal advice, and emotional support created a network that extended beyond physical proximity. In this space, I could speak freely, ask questions, and test ideas without fear of immediate judgment or reprisal from my family. Amid all the strategic planning, I allowed myself moments of vulnerability. One evening, I met a close ally for coffee. I shared the heartbreak, the subtle manipulations, the accumulation of betrayals that had left me questioning my worth. I allowed tears to spill unguarded, recounting incidents that had seemed small at the time, but now revealed themselves as pieces of a calculated scheme. Listening silently, my ally nodded, validating each story, offering perspective without judgment. That conversation, quiet and empathetic, reminded me that while strategy was critical, so was connection. Feeling understood, even briefly, strengthened my resolve. Back at home, I mapped out my plan. The digital evidence would serve as the backbone. Legal consultation provided a framework to understand rights, privacy, and boundaries. Emotional check-ins with allies ensured I maintained perspective and avoided reactive decisions. Each step, deliberate and measured, transformed the overwhelming weight of betrayal into actionable insight. I realized that strategy wasn't cold calculation. It was the careful blending of clarity, patience, and emotional intelligence. Even as I felt more in control, a tension lingered. Each new piece of evidence, each revelation, carried potential consequences that could ripple far beyond my immediate circle. The thought pressed against me. If I revealed everything now, how would my parents react? Would they crumble under scrutiny or retaliate in ways I hadn't foreseen? The uncertainty created a gripping suspense, a micro cliffhanger within each decision I made. And yet, for the first time, I felt the pulse of empowerment. I wasn't acting recklessly. I was learning the terrain, observing every move, preparing for the moment when clarity and action would converge. At the end of that day, I closed my laptop and sat quietly, reflecting on the process. The intensity of discovery, the shocks and betrayals had been exhausting, but there was relief too. I had begun to turn chaos into order, confusion into clarity, and in those quiet moments, I allowed myself to reconnect with what mattered most: my children, my well-being, and the future I was determined to shape on my own terms. A final thought lingered in my mind as I prepared for the next stage of this journey. The battlefield had been revealed, the players identified, and the alliances tested. Now it was time to plan, to anticipate, and to act with precision. And yet, the question remained unresolved. A subtle, tension-filled micro cliffhanger. If I made my move too soon, would the truth serve justice or only provoke chaos beyond my control? The calendar marked the approach of Christmas, a date I had dreaded and dreaded again for years. I watched the days tick closer with an odd mixture of apprehension and anticipation. This year, I decided, I would not be invisible. I spent hours drafting a post that outlined the pattern of favoritism, the subtle exclusions, the financial manipulations. Every screenshot, every message, every forgotten gift had been meticulously cataloged. I imagined the impact, the reactions, the sudden awareness they would feel when confronted with the truth in such a public way. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, heart racing. The tension was palpable. Each second felt suspended in a fragile balance between justice and chaos. But as I prepared to hit publish, I paused. I noticed a conversation between my parents, one I hadn't intended to see, unfolding on a private group chat. Their words revealed lies they had told each other, their attempts to cover past actions, the very traps they had laid for themselves. The irony struck me sharply. They were ensnared by their own deception. A sudden clarity washed over me. Maybe public exposure wasn't necessary. Perhaps the universe, or fate, was already orchestrating the revelation. I pulled back, holding the post in draft. The suspense hung in the air like a storm cloud, unresolved. The micro cliffhanger lingered. Would I post it anyway, or trust the unfolding chaos to unveil the truth on its own? I watched their social media feeds carefully, noting each comment, each post, each subtle slip. The anticipation built, my mind alive with possibilities and strategies. Every move they made could be a clue, a misstep, a thread to unravel. I felt tension twist through me, anxiety, curiosity, the thrill of careful calculation. Each day of restraint sharpened my awareness, my patience, my readiness. This wasn't about public humiliation. It was about strategic revelation, about reclaiming dignity without losing control. As the holiday approached, I prepared mentally for every predictable reaction. Gaslighting would come, I knew, denial, manipulation, attempts to paint me as overly sensitive or vindictive. Flying monkeys might appear, friends or distant relatives, sent to defend the illusion of family perfection. I readied myself, documenting everything, keeping communication calm, factual, unemotional. My strategy was simple: present the evidence clearly, objectively, and allow reality to speak for itself. Any overt aggression or emotional display would undermine my position. Precision mattered more than passion. The first ripple of drama appeared unexpectedly. My mother commented on my brother's post, contradicting something he had publicly claimed, then paused, realizing she had contradicted herself. My father replied sharply, their disagreement escalating into a minor argument that quickly drew attention from extended family watching the live thread. I watched in awe as the tension unfolded, a spontaneous display of the very cracks I had been cataloging. The twist was delicious in its subtlety. I hadn't needed to push anything. Their own deception, their own favoritism, had begun to unravel organically. In the quiet moments that followed, I sat with my children, pulling them close. I whispered to them, reminding myself aloud too, that true family wasn't about appearances or control. It was about love, presence, and authenticity. My hands on their small shoulders, the warmth of their trust, reminded me of what mattered. Even as drama unfolded on social media, even as tension grew in the background, I felt a deep empathy, a grounding sense of purpose. This pause was essential, not just for me, but for my children, who deserved to see me calm, confident, and present despite the chaos. Still, the question of the post lingered, a micro cliffhanger that both haunted and propelled me. If I released it now, the impact would be immediate and explosive. Families would react, reputations would shift, and the truth would finally be undeniable. Yet restraint promised an even more compelling effect. The timing, the subtle orchestration of revelation could allow natural consequences to unfold, maximizing clarity and minimizing collateral damage. The suspense of choice created a quiet tension, a magnetic pull that kept my focus razor sharp. Over the following days, I observed every subtle cue, every hint of imbalance, documenting patterns that had been invisible to the casual observer. The anticipation built, a steady hum in the background, as if the entire family drama were a live performance in which I held the director's insight. I refined my strategy, ensuring that if intervention became necessary, I would act with precision and moral clarity. This careful patience allowed the tension to stretch, creating a roller coaster of emotional beats. Anxiety, curiosity, suspense, anticipation, without tipping into chaos. On Christmas Eve, the stage was set. The minor quarrels, the subtle contradictions, the gaps between words and reality, all aligned to create a chain reaction. I documented each detail, remaining an observer more than a participant. As I watched, I felt the thrill of control tempered by compassion. I did not gloat, I did not lash out. I simply held space for the truth to emerge, confident in its inevitability. The tension, the suspense, the anticipation, all of it coalesced into a powerful force, invisible yet undeniable. Finally, after hours of careful observation, I allowed myself a quiet moment of relief. I hugged my children, whispered reassurances, and reflected on the meaning of family, trust, and love. Even amid strategic patience, emotional intelligence remained paramount. The empathy, the tenderness, and the presence with my children ensured that the story I was crafting would not be one of bitterness, but one of clarity and dignity. And yet, a final thought hung in the air, a subtle micro cliffhanger. Would the unfolding drama reach its climax naturally? Or would I need to step in to reveal the truth completely? That question, unanswered, kept the audience and myself on edge, ready for the next move. The weeks following the holidays unfolded in ways I had anticipated and in ways I hadn't. My meticulous documentation had become a record of undeniable truth. Legal consultations confirmed my understanding. Financial records, screenshots, and communication logs were sufficient to hold my parents accountable for their manipulations and favoritism. I presented the evidence calmly, objectively, and methodically, exposing the discrepancies in allowances, gifts, and support between my children and my brothers. My parents had no room to argue. Their own actions were laid bare in a sequence that even they could not dispute. The revelation caused immediate ripples. Community members, friends, extended family, neighbors began to notice patterns they had overlooked before. Whispers turned to conversations, conversations to questions directed at my parents. Social pressure built, subtle at first, then undeniable. People who had once assumed favoritism was harmless now confronted the consequences, asking why certain children had consistently been overlooked. In that moment, I felt the quiet satisfaction of validation, not revenge, not anger, just acknowledgement of the reality I had endured for years. My brother, confronted with evidence of both his favoritism and financial deceit, attempted the usual defenses: denial, minimization, and half-truths. But the careful accumulation of proof left little room for escape. His reactions, though initially defensive, soon revealed cracks in his composure. the micro cliffhanger lingered. Would they finally recognize the damage they had caused or continue to deny the truth, clinging to a narrative that no longer served them? I observed with measured patience, noting that justice was not simply the revelation of facts. It was the transformation of perception, both mine and theirs. As the legal and social consequences took shape, I felt an unfamiliar sense of liberation. For the first time in years, I was untethered from manipulation. The years of self-doubt, of questioning my own instincts and love, began to dissolve. I recognized that empowerment wasn't about retaliation. It was about reclaiming agency. My children, present throughout this process, they became witnesses not to conflict, but to integrity, courage, and clarity. Their admiration and trust reinforced the knowledge that my actions, though cautious and deliberate, were just. Then, unexpectedly, another twist emerged. A distant cousin, someone I had assumed was aligned with my parents' worldview, reached out. Their message was sincere and unanticipated. An apology for past actions, acknowledgement of their silence, and an offer to rebuild a relationship based on honesty rather than deception. The surprise gesture cut through months of tension, introducing a ripple effect that extended beyond the immediate circle. It reminded me that even within toxic networks, accountability and empathy could emerge, creating opportunities for reconciliation without compromising personal boundaries. The liberation I felt was multifaceted. Not only had I ensured that financial and social justice had been served, but I had also established a precedent for how abuse within family structures could be addressed. This ripple effect began to influence others in my network, inspiring discussions about boundaries, fairness, and accountability. I realized that my journey was not just about personal vindication. It was about illuminating paths for others who might otherwise remain unseen or unheard. Yet the process was far from passive. I continued to monitor interactions, social cues, and family gatherings, ensuring that no further manipulation could take root. Awareness and vigilance became integral components of my empowerment. I celebrated milestones quietly, taking note of the subtle shifts in behavior around me. My parents, confronted with undeniable facts, began to show signs of discomfort, but I held my boundaries firmly. Observation replaced reaction. Clarity replaced confusion. At the same time, I allowed myself moments of quiet reflection. Sitting with my children, I shared memories and laughter, emphasizing love untainted by favoritism. These pauses provided emotional grounding, a reminder that empowerment was as much about nurturing joy and resilience as it was about confronting wrongdoing. The contrast between private fulfillment and public reckoning underscored the depth of my progress. I was no longer reacting to harm, but creating a life of integrity and purpose. Even with the tangible consequences in motion, the lingering micro cliffhanger persisted. Would my parents internalize the lessons, accept responsibility, and change, or continue to deny and deflect, clinging to old patterns? This uncertainty kept the tension alive, compelling me to maintain vigilance while simultaneously embracing my freedom. Justice had been orchestrated, but the human heart's response remained unpredictable, a reality I had learned to accept as part of the journey. The culmination of these events was both satisfying and instructive. My empowerment was not explosive or vengeful. It was deliberate, careful, and layered. Legal exposure, social validation, and personal boundaries combined to create a framework in which I could thrive. Observing my children's delight in simple joys, untainted by favoritism or manipulation, reinforced the value of what I had accomplished. And when the distant cousin's apology arrived, the lesson crystallized. Even within a fractured system, accountability and growth were possible, often in the most unexpected ways. By the end of this chapter, I realized that true justice extended beyond punishment. It encompassed clarity, emotional resilience, social recognition, and the ability to create ripples that could guide others toward fairness and integrity. The intricate interplay of evidence, strategy, and empathy had redefined the family dynamic without compromising my values. And as I closed the chapter on past abuses, a quiet sense of anticipation remained. There was still work to do, still vigilance required, but the foundation of empowerment, justice, and genuine reconciliation had been laid. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the living room. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of calm settle over me, unbroken by worry or manipulation. I had established boundaries that were both firm and liberating. No more unexpected calls in the middle of the night. No more subtle digs disguised as concern. No more invisible exclusions. My digital presence was controlled, my social media interactions curated to protect my peace, and my home felt like a sanctuary rather than a minefield of emotional landmines. The relief was profound, a gentle but steady current that seeped into every corner of my life. I sat on the couch with my children, watching them play, laughing freely without fear of comparison or judgment. Their joy was infectious, and I let myself be fully present in it. I shared stories from my own childhood, moments that were both bittersweet and instructive, helping them understand resilience, self-worth, and the importance of standing firm in the face of unfairness. These moments were my anchor, a reminder that family wasn't defined by blood alone, but by love, trust, and presence. The empathy I felt for my children intertwined with my own healing, creating a quiet sense of fulfillment I had never experienced before. Over the weeks, I refined my boundaries further. I implemented no-contact protocols with toxic family members, ensuring that interactions occurred only when absolutely necessary and always on my terms. Physical boundaries were respected, digital boundaries enforced, and information flow tightly controlled. I felt a profound sense of empowerment in this structure, knowing that my peace was safeguarded not by avoidance alone, but by thoughtful, deliberate design. Each day, as I woke and moved through my routines, the calm persisted, reinforcing my ability to respond rather than react, to observe rather than be swept away by drama. With the foundation of safety and stability established, I turned my attention to growth. Career opportunities that I had once deferred to accommodate family obligations now became my focus. I pursued projects that excited me, invested in my skills, and allowed myself to explore creative pursuits that had long been neglected. Financial independence, once a distant goal shadowed by manipulation, became tangible. I built systems to manage my resources, ensuring that my children and I would thrive on our own terms. Each achievement, each step forward, was a quiet rebellion against the years of invisibility and undervaluation. The reconstruction of my personal life also included rebuilding relationships based on authenticity and trust. I cultivated a chosen family of supportive friends, mentors, and allies who understood my journey and respected my boundaries. These relationships were not bound by blood, but by loyalty, empathy, and mutual respect. Trust was built gradually, but each connection strengthened the network of support that allowed me to fully inhabit my renewed sense of self. I reveled in conversations that were honest, in laughter that was untainted by manipulation, and in the comfort of shared understanding. And then, unexpectedly, a twist appeared that expanded the scope of my journey. Through an online support group, I encountered another woman facing manipulation from her family. Her story mirrored mine in chilling ways, and I felt an immediate, visceral connection. I realized that the knowledge and strategies I had developed could empower others. By mentoring her, sharing resources, and offering guidance, I could transform my experience of pain into a force for positive change. The act of helping someone else navigate a toxic family dynamic became a form of closure, a final affirmation that my journey had purpose beyond my own liberation. Even in these moments of empowerment, I allowed myself pauses to reflect. I held my children, watched them grow, and acknowledged the resilience that had been cultivated not only in them, but in me. Hope emerged not as a fleeting sentiment, but as a steady undercurrent, guiding every decision, every action, every relationship. The fulfillment of achieving freedom, recognition, and agency was profound, yet it was balanced by gratitude for the lessons that had shaped me. Each challenge overcome became a marker of strength, a testament to endurance, and a beacon for the future I was building. Thriving became my default state, not in grand gestures or dramatic victories, but in the quiet, consistent presence of autonomy, joy, and intention. I relished the peace of mornings with my children, the satisfaction of projects completed, and the authenticity of relationships nurtured without compromise. Even the shadows of the past, the memories of manipulation and betrayal, were reframed as guideposts, lessons that informed my boundaries, my decisions, and my vision for a life defined by choice rather than obligation. In the evenings, I often paused to consider the broader ripple effect of my journey. My story, once private and isolating, now had the potential to empower others, to illustrate that recovery from family abuse was not only possible but transformative. By guiding someone else, by offering tools and strategies grounded in lived experience, I could extend the reach of my empowerment beyond my own household. That realization, combined with the steady rhythm of daily life, created a profound sense of purpose and completeness. Finally, I understood that building a new life was not a single event, but an ongoing process, a deliberate construction of safety, growth, and authenticity. With firm boundaries, meaningful connections, and opportunities to help others, I embraced a future I had once only imagined. Hope, fulfillment, and the quiet joy of thriving were no longer distant goals. They were my present reality. The journey had been arduous, but the destination was a life of choice, clarity, and unwavering agency. And as I watched my children play, fully seen and fully loved, I knew that the transformation was complete, not just for me, but for the legacy of empowerment I would continue to cultivate.